Section 6.2 is all about adding and subtracting rational expressions. And if you think about it, what that really is adding and subtracting fractions. And the same rule applies when we have variables as it does any other time. So when we add or subtract fractions, we want to make sure that we have a common denominator. So when we're doing problems like this in this section and they have a common denominator, it should be pretty straightforward. We're going to add or subtract the numerators. But the twist to this is once we do that, we want to see if things factor down and simplify any more. So let's take a look at number one. Number one, we have a common denominator, so we're going to keep the denominator the same. And then what we're simply going to do is we're going to add the numerator. That's going to be 8x. You'll see that the 8 over 6 reduces, so it becomes 4x over 3. And that is simplified expression. If we look at number two, again, it's set up really nicely for us so that we have the same denominator. So we're going to keep the denominator the same, x plus 3. And we're going to follow the operation, which just says x squared minus 9. Now, what makes this one a little bit different is you'll notice that x squared minus 9 is factorable. So we're going to factor that to be x plus 3 and x minus 3 over x plus 3. And that's going to cancel out. And so our final answer is x minus 3. Where this gets a little bit more complicated is where we have to find a common denominator. So if we look at number 3, you can notice that they're not the same denominator. And so what you want to do is you have to figure out how you can create a common denominator. I'm going to add a little bit more space. Oops. And I'm going to compare the denominators. And I got to figure out what that LCD will be. So if I notice on the right, it has a 2, but this is missing a 2, so I'm going to multiply the left one by 2 over 2. And then if I go and I compare the A's, this has 3 A's, well this has 4. That means I got to add another A in there. But if we compare the B's, they both have a B, so we don't have to worry about that. So I don't have to multiply the one on the right, but I do need to multiply the one on the left. So this becomes 14a over 2a to the 4th times b. The second one will stay the same, but now you'll notice we have a common denominator. And once that happens, again, we're going to just add the numerator and the denominator will stay the same. And then I'll see if anything cancels out. Numerator isn't factorable. That's not factorable, so that's going to end up being my final answer. If we take a look at number 4, again, we're going to notice that we do not have a common denominator. They're not exactly the same. And even if we try to pull out a negative, let's say from this one, it changes it to a negative x and a negative 5, which is still not the same. So these are actually different terms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of group that and think of that as one grouping in itself versus this grouping. And I got to figure out how I can make those the same. Well, to make the right one the same as the left, I'll have to add in an x plus 5. And again, one of the reasons why we're doing to the numerator and the denominator is because this is really like multiplying by 1. X plus 5 over x plus 5 is 1. So I'm not changing anything. I'm just now making those denominators the same. So this is now equal to that. And you'll notice over here, this is missing the x minus 5. So I'll multiply that over here and on this side. Now if we compare them in the numerator of the first one, I have x minus 5. And now I have x minus 5 times x plus 5. And that's plus 6x times the quantity x plus 5 over x minus 5 times x plus 5. Same denominator. I'm going to keep that the same. I'm not going to FOIL it or multiply it out because I want to keep it that way so I can see it later. And then I'm going to add the numerators. Now, if you want to go ahead and distribute right away, you can. I'm going to just wait for it. So x minus 5 plus 6x times x plus 5. But now I want to combine those like terms. So I'm going to get x minus 5 plus 6x squared plus 30x. That's all going to be over the same. I'm going to put this in order. Oops, I'm going to make that a 31x. I'll combine like terms right away. Over x minus 5 and x plus 5. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to see if that factors anymore. And actually it doesn't, because if you look at, if I multiply 6 times negative 5, that gives you negative 30. And to give you a combination of negative, you need that to be positive. So it actually doesn't factor down. So that would be our simplified answer in this case. When we start to look at number 5 and number 6, you'll notice that they're really completely off from each other. But the thing is, we don't want to start from scratch and multiply the right one by x squared minus 9 and the left one by x squared minus 4x plus 3. We want to factor it down. That will help us to find a easier common denominator. So I'm going to get x minus 3, x plus 3, and then minus, and then that's going to cancel to x minus 3, x minus 1. And what you'll notice then, hopefully, is you see how the x minus 3 are in common right there. So I need to get this x plus 3 over to this side. And I want to get this x minus 1 over to the left side. So my denominator now is 3 binomials. I'll distribute this right away. You're going to get 2x squared minus 2x. And over here, I'm going to distribute a negative 3 since it's a subtraction. So it's negative 3x minus 9. And I'll regroup that. I'm just going to bring that over for right now. And I want to see if the numerator factors down. So 2 times 9 is negative 18. I'm going to list my factor pairs. Nothing will give me the middle, so that's actually factored. So let's write those binomials back in. And that would be that answer for that one. All right, go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to try to do number 6. Again, what you're going to do is you're going to factor this one, you're going to factor that one, and then compare the binomials and see what you need to add in. I apologize, this should be an x minus 12. Do you guys see that right there instead of plus 12? All right, you should get 3x squared minus 4x plus 5 in the numerator, and x plus 2 times x plus 4 times x minus 3 in the denominator. You'll notice that up here, when I have a binomial times a binomial, I had to FOIL that. And the same thing here, at a binomial times a binomial, and that became that as well. All right, one last question for you guys. Go ahead and pause the video. This time it's 3 terms, so make sure that the denominator is the same in all 3. When you're finished, play it and check your answer, and then you can go ahead and start the homework. All right, and your final answer should be 5 minus x. A couple of things that you might want to check for if you got it incorrect is that you distributed a negative 2 right there, and then that all 3 of them needed an x, and then x minus 5. You can see the x here, x here, x here, and then I had to add in x minus 5 over here. It was already there and there. All right. If you have any questions, just make sure you come and ask during class.